My NetGalley ratio is currently in the garbage. It is so bad right now. Probably not actually that terrible. It's like a 53%, but when the recommended is 80, not feeling great about that number. So I currently have 10 outstanding arcs I need to get to, and this is basically going to be the beginning of a project of me clearing those out, getting them read so that I can fix my ratio and then actually be able to request things again and have like a decent chance of being approved for them. So the two I have coming out are, first of all, God and the Gumiho by Sophie Kim. This one is a fantasy romance kind of a thing that's coming out on June 4th. This one's following a trickster god who has been kicked out of the heavenly realms, and he's told he can return if he kills a demon and a notorious Gumiho. But what he doesn't know is that the Gumiho he's hunting happens to be the barista at his favorite coffee shop, and she finds out what he's up to and starts trying to like meddle with his investigation. She gets involved to try and throw him off her scent, and I think it sounds like it's going to be very like hijinks ensue and very fun. So I think it's going to be a really enjoyable read. I'm excited for it, and again, that's coming out on June 4th. It's currently the 2nd, so I have no delusions that that's going to be done prior to the book coming out, but hopefully like shortly after. The other book I have is coming out on June 25th, and this one is Foul Days by Genevieve Adamova. This one is about a woman who is a witch, and she has traded her shadow, which is the source of her powers, for passage into a walled city. But she finds out that she's going to need her powers again, and so she needs to retrieve her shadow, but it is now in the possession of the Czar of Monsters, who is also her ex. So it sounds like it's going to be a little bit awkward, a little bit exciting and adventurous. It's very much like a monster hunter story. She's a monster hunter in the vein of like The Witcher, and it's based in Slavic folklore. So it sounds like it's going to be super fun and very like action-packed and exciting. So also very much looking forward to that one. In terms of backlist titles, I would like to get to, I think, The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. I've loved everything I've read from her so far. I just picked this one up. I picked up this arc, read about 20% of it, I think, and I was just in a slump at the time. It was a me problem and not a the book problem, and I never got through it. I was just kind of struggling, and I think I just need to give this one another go. I need to give it a fresh start and try again, and I am kind of in the mood for some mystery, and I think that'll help kind of mix things up a little bit since the other two are both fantasy. So that is going to be the goal for this video. We're going to try and get through those 3 arcs and get them all reviewed so that I can finally start improving my NetGalley ratio again and be able to request more things in future. So I hope you'll join me for this adventure, and I'm going to go see what I can get read in the next little while. It's been a little while because I finished another book in the meantime, but I have finally started The God and the Gumiho, and I'm really enjoying this one so far. I think the writing is a little bit stilted in a few places, so it kind of catches me off guard a little bit, but for the most part I'm really enjoying the narration style. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, just a little bit snarky in a way that I'm really enjoying. We have 2 main characters who are both kind of terrible people, and I love that the book is committing to that because they're both really unlikable in really interesting ways, so I'm enjoying that part of it. And I'm just curious to see where this is going to go because I don't really know where it's going, but it does start off. But the way it starts off, it just very much drops you into the midst of things. The plot is just about to kick off where I've gotten to, but we get a few chapters kind of introducing the characters and their personalities and some of the background information about them, like how they've ended up in the positions that they're in. But the stuff that that we've learned about them has just been like really wild. I was describing this to a friend of mine yesterday, and I think she said something that felt very accurate, which is that she said it sounds like this book, like you've gotten on in a car with this book and you've buckled up and you've been like, hey, where are we going? And the book is just like looked at you, looked back at the road, and then floored it. That's really what it feels like. It just like tosses you into the deep end in a way that I think is really fun. But this one, in case I forgot to describe it earlier, this one is following God the Fallen, who is a god of trickery and treachery who has been kicked out of the heavenly realm for something that he's done like many years ago, and he is now like serving out a sentence in the mortal realm, hunting unruly creatures who are basically monsters who are causing havoc with the mortals. And so he is basically living as a detective in the mortal realm at this point. And then our other character is Hani, who is the infamous Scarlet Fox, this Gumiho who went on a massive rampage about 100 years ago, killed like 500 people, and then disappeared. And she's basically retired, and she is working as a barista in a coffee shop. And the two of them know each other because he frequents that coffee shop and she hates him and he hates her, and they just have this like really antagonistic relationship where he comes into the coffee shop to be a Karen and she gets really mad at him because she just doesn't have the patience for his nonsense, and they just have this like very funny like antagonistic relationship based around his love of coffee and her hatred of coffee. And I find that like very funny. But that's basically where the story kicks off, is we kind of meet them, we find out some of the background information about them and how they've ended up in the various positions that they're in, and some of their, like, you know, I would say friends is a strong word, but like co-workers, people they associate with. We learn a little bit about them and the kind of relationships they have there. And now things are really starting to kick off because I think Soka is about to start hunting the Scarlet Fox, which importantly is Hani. So she's gonna get involved and try to like stop him from figuring out who she is. So I think that's gonna be fun. I'm very excited to see where it's gonna go because it does just feel like this book drops you in and runs with it. And I'm really appreciating how much it is committing to making the characters like unpleasant, kind of terrible people, because they're a god of treachery and a nine-tailed fox who is known for eating people's livers and souls. So I'm appreciating how much it is committing to that. It's saying like, yeah, look at these people, they're kind of terrible. Let's find out what they're gonna do. And I'm finding that like very fun. I'm checking in a little bit earlier than I was originally planning because I'm about a third of the way through The God and the Gumiho right now, and I just have to say that I really am enjoying this. Both of the main characters are so like unpleasant in their own ways, but in ways that I think are really interesting. And I'm really enjoying reading both Hani and Soka's perspectives, and the way that they're just like constantly pissing each other off and just bugging each other all the time is really funny. Like they're so stubborn, both of them, that like neither of them will back down, and just that dynamic is very funny to me. They're trying to investigate this like murder mystery, and what I'm finding really interesting about that is the way that Hani cares a lot about what's happening. Like she's his assistant per the premise because she wants to like get in the way of his investigations, but there's also this element of like there is one investigation that she actually really cares about, that like she wants to help solve this case because she's invested in like the well-being of other creatures in a way that I think is really interesting, where she like kind of doesn't care about like mortals, but her like fellow creatures she really cares a lot about. And I find that like a really interesting character trait, and the ways that she is like getting involved in this investigation with like a real sincerity, where it's like she really does want to help in this case. I'm finding that really interesting as it combines with like her other motives for taking on this role as Soka's assistant. So just really enjoying the dynamic between the two of them. I think it's like very fun. It's a little bit over the top. Everything is a little bit silly, but in a way that's just like so intentional and entertaining. Like it's clear that that's the vibe it's meant to have. And I'm just really enjoying reading from both of their perspectives because they're both so annoyed with the other one in ways that are just really, really funny. So yeah, I'm having a really good time with this. I am curious to see where the investigation is going to go, because I think it's not so much like a case of like who done it. We kind of know who is behind the killings. It's more a matter of like how in the world are we going to catch them, because they're going to be very hard to find. It's somebody who can like hide kind of in plain sight. So there's a lot of like that element going on. I'm liking the kind of magic stuff that's going on. I think it's really interesting, all the different like creatures that are involved and the different people that we're meeting throughout the investigation. So it's a fun book. I'm having a good time with it, and I'm looking forward to getting to the rest of it. I think I am going to try and finish this like maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I think Mom and I are going to run some errands today, but later I'm going to go and like just try to read as much as I can, because I want to get this done so that I can also start on Foul Days as well. But also I just really want to know what happens, and I'm finding it like very propulsive. It's a fairly long book. It's like 400 some pages. It's not really a long book, I guess, but like it's one of the longer ones I have on my like TBR for the month, and it doesn't feel long at all. It feels like very propulsive, like there's constantly stuff happening that is pushing the plot forward, and it's just like a really easy read. I'm having a great time. So that's kind of my thoughts at this like 1/3 mark, but I just had to check in because I'm enjoying Hani and Soka so much. They're just interesting characters, and I'm excited to see what the like resolution for this is going to be, because there is one specific like irreconcilable difference between them that I'm curious to see how that's going to get dealt with. So yeah, really glad that I got an ARC for this one, because it is a really, really fun book so far. I've reached the halfway point. I'm still loving it. We've gotten a twist that I really like, and I'm just so excited to see where this is gonna go. The romance in it is progressing in a very fun way. It's all like very silly and tropey and like over the top, and I'm enjoying the way that these two characters like hate each other so much, and they're trying to like hold on to that hatred and kind of failing, both of them. and we get the there was only one bed trope, a classic. And my other thought on this so far that isn't like specifically plot related is I was noticing that there's this thing in the book that I like when books do this, when there's like a specific religion in a book, and then there's like swear words that are associated with that specific religion. So there's quite a few here, and like one of them, the one that's like throwing me off, is people will exclaim Juanin's tits when, you know, something is shocking or something goes wrong. And the thing that is throwing me is that Juanin is just a guy. He's just a guy, like, alive in the world. People know who he is. And what's more is that he's one of the main character's older brother. He's Silka's older brother. So, like, does he know when people exclaim Juanin's tits? Like, is he omniscient? I don't know. Unclear exactly what Juanin is up to or what he's capable of. He's not been, like, featured on page very much. But, like, does he know? And is it weird for Silka that people will just, like, yell about his brother's tits? Is that just, like that's gotta be weird for him, right? Like, he's had thousands of years to get used to it, sure, but, like, that's gotta be weird for him, right? That just hit me in a bit that I was reading, and I'm just having to, like, process that and think about that. It's really funny. I'm really enjoying it. I just was like, wait a second. He's just a guy, though. Like, he's just a guy in this book. So yeah, that was the thing I found funny. So far, plot is really good. It's a fun murder mystery. I think that, like, there's not a lot of clues that, like, get sprinkled through, so I don't think it's something you could, like, figure out on your own. That's kind of not what it's trying to do. But I am liking, like, the investigation portions of it and the way that Hani and Silka are, like, working as a team to try and solve this mystery, because they have, like, very different strengths, and I like the way that they're, even as much as they hate each other, as much as they're, like, frustrated with each other, the way that they, like, work together is really fun, and I think that, like, they really complement each other well, so I'm enjoying that part of it. But yeah, I'm just past the halfway point. I've got to do a little bit of cleaning this evening, but hopefully I'll be able to finish this tomorrow. Probably read a little more this evening, but hopefully I'll be able to finish it tomorrow and have my final thoughts. Fingers crossed. Anyway. Well, I'm a little behind my kind of self-imposed reading schedule, but I do have two updates, because I finished The God and the Gumiho and I have started Foul Days. So, starting with The God and the Gumiho, I really liked this. I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. I do have a couple of issues with it, specifically around some of the characters and some of the conveniences that it takes. I think are a little bit frustrating, but overall this was extremely fun. I had a really good time reading it. I spent a lot of time just, like, smiling and giggling and just, like, enjoying it, kind of going with the flow with the book, because it's very much a book that I think doesn't take itself too seriously for the most part. It's going for this kind of, like, fun, almost I would describe it like fanfic-y kind of vibe, but, like, it's doing it intentionally. It's going like, look how silly this is, we're having a great time. So I really enjoyed the kind of overall tone of it. I think it's just, like, a fun, quick, easy read, and I will definitely be reading the sequel. I don't know how many books are going to be in the series, but it's called, like, Fate's Thread or something. So I will definitely be reading later books in the series. I thought it was just, like, so much fun. It was such a, like, enjoyable read. Now, my main issues come with, I think I said already, the characters and some of the conveniences that happen. So there's some stuff that happens between Silka and Hani. Like, the romance between them, very cute. Really enjoyed, for the most part, their romance. I thought it was really fun as they go from these, I would say enemies, but enemies in, like, this very mundane sense, where he, like, comes into the coffee shop to be a jerk, and she hates him for that, and he hates her because she doesn't make his coffee right. Like, very mundane kind of enemies, but as they kind of move from that towards, like, something like friendship and eventually into this, like, romantic relationship, I liked that progression for them. I thought it was really fun. The banter was really good. They're both, like, very snarky characters, and I just enjoyed, like, that journey for them. But I think it happens a little too quickly, because there is a timeline given for the book that Silka is given, like, 15 days to achieve his goal, which is to kill this, like, darkness demon thing, and also to kill the Scarlet Fox. Not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book. So he's given, like, 15 days to do that, and ultimately I would say I don't think the timeline matters at all, because the entirety of the book takes place across, like, 5-ish days. So I felt like the romance progressed just, like, a little too quickly. Like, they are madly in love at the end, and it's, like, this very dramatic moment, but it felt kind of underdeveloped because it takes place across like 5 days. And somehow they've gone from like hating each other's guts and being ready to like murder each other to being so in love that there's this like very dramatic thing about that at the very end of the book. So like, I feel like that timeline didn't work, and I also didn't love that we get a countdown and then the countdown just doesn't matter because they still have like 10 days left when the book ends. And I felt like it completely took away some of the tension of having that countdown, of having a timeline across which they needed to like complete a task. So I felt like that kind of took out some of the tension of the book, and I was a little upset about that. The other issue I had is that there's some inconsistencies that feel like very convenient. It's just they're there to move the romance forward or the plot forward. So there's like, I think in particular, like a really mild example I can give that's not spoilers at all, is that there's a moment fairly early on, like a little before the halfway point, where Honey has to drive Soka's car, and this is like his beloved car, and she has to drive it because he's exhausted, and they're going on this like trip to find a witness, and it's a whole thing. But she drives his car, he sleeps while she's driving, and the parts where he is awake, like, it's fine. Her driving is fine. They are just going on their little road trip. At the end of the book, for like dramatic purposes, there's a bit where she has to drive his car again, and she's driving like a maniac. She's a terrible driver, and he's thinking, I'm never gonna let her drive again, and she should never be allowed to operate a motor vehicle. And it was just like, it felt very convenient. Like, Honey clearly can drive and it's not a problem. It tries to say like, oh, she can't drive in the dark, but given everything that's being described, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it made a lot of sense. It was inconsistent with the earlier detail. So there's like some inconsistencies like that that just kind of frustrated me a little bit, that were a little bit about like pushing things forward or doing something for like a silly moment that I didn't think quite made sense. And I also think that Honey is very like flip-floppy on whether she feels guilty or not on some of what she's doing, which I really liked at the beginning, that Honey and Soka are described as being like basically kind of terrible people individually. And then like halfway through they both kind of like shift and are not that kind of terrible person. I think for Soka, I really believed his arc, that a lot of his story is about like feeling adrift and alone, and like finding companionship finally does something to him that like makes him start to care about people in general. He like opens himself up to caring about other people, and like for him I thought it was fine. But Honey's kind of flip-flopping on everything was frustrating because I don't think it worked as well for her. There was also this like one comparison that kept popping up that never really actually got drawn like specifically about like the way that people behave based on like their nature, because she keeps talking about like Gumihos is in their nature to kill. It's a thing that she talks about a lot throughout the book. But and Soka keeps going, well, it's my nature to deceive people and be trickery and treachery, like incarnate. That's what he does. But I feel like those two things are treated very differently, even though they get talked about the same, which I thought was a little bit odd. So despite all of those complaints, I know it sounds like I had like a ton of complaints that I didn't like the book. Overall, it is so much fun. It is just like silly, good, tropey fun. And for the most part, I was able to kind of put aside my disbelief and just, you know, read it and have a good time. There were just like a handful of things that I found a little bit annoying, a little bit frustrating about the way that things unfolded. I think mostly in the latter half. I'd say I think I like the first half a lot better. I think the big issue that causes all those other issues in the latter half is that the stakes jump dramatically. So you go from like having fairly high stakes to like really high stakes. And I don't know that the high stakes at the end really worked with the overall tone of the book, because it kind of wanted to like have its cake and eat it too, because it was wanting to be silly and goofy and fun and like, oh, look at this silly little romance, but it also wanted to have these like the world will be destroyed kind of stakes. And I felt that that didn't quite mesh as well as it could have. So yeah, overall, did really enjoy it. Still giving it 4 stars. Had a good time. Will definitely be reading future installments in the series. Just had like a few issues, which they sound like I had a lot more issues than I really did. They didn't really dent my enjoyment of the book that much. It was just stuff that I was thinking about as I was kind of like finishing it up and kind of reflecting on it afterwards, because I finished it yesterday and I did not get to update yesterday because my friends and I were playing 13th Age last night, so that took precedence. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on The God and the Gumiho. Solid book, did enjoy it, highly recommend, especially if you're looking for something kind of light and fun and easy. And then Foul Days, I went ahead and started, and I'm gonna have to hold that thought because my battery is flashing. I'll be right back. Okay, battery replaced, now we can talk about the second book. So, Foul Days, as I was saying, I started this last night, right before my friends and I started playing 13th Age, and this one I'm also really enjoying so far. It's a very different tone. But this one is following Kosara, who is a witch. She lives in the walled city of Chernograd, and the setup is that there are these two cities, Chernograd, which is walled in with a horrifying tentacle wall, and Belgrad, which is its sister city that created the wall. And the wall exists to keep the monsters of the world basically trapped. So the monsters all live in Chernograd. And at the very beginning of the book, it's New Year's Eve, which is the beginning of what's called the Foul Days, which are 12 days between New Year's Eve and St. Yoden's Day, I think is the name. There's a saint who's like the saint of the Baptist kind of character. And when his day arrives, then the year is considered baptized and the monsters become less active. There are some monsters that can only be in Chernograd and kind of in the mortal realm during the Foul Days, and then there's others that are around all of the time, but they're much less active. But the big thing for Kosara is that she was previously in a relationship with a guy who is the Tsar of Monsters. He's called the Zmei, and he was really abusive. It's very clear early on that he's very abusive, and she escaped from him 7 years before the book begins. And now every year during the Foul Days, he comes looking for her, and he forces her to play a game of cards with him. And she is desperately trying to figure out how to, like, escape him, like, permanently. Like, how does she get him to leave her alone? So she's dealing with that, and the book kicks off midnight on New Year's Eve, the arrival of all of the monsters, and she's playing cards with a couple of her monster hunter friends, Roxana and Malamir, and a mysterious stranger who offers her safe passage out of the city of Chernograd into Belgrad, where the monsters can't go, including Zmei. He can't go there either. And he offers her that in exchange for her shadow, because a witch's shadow is the source of her power, and he clearly is collecting them. And so she, not spoilers, this is like chapter 1, she takes that deal to try and get away from the Zmei, and ends up in Belgrad and immediately is regretting it. But she's now in Belgrad minus her shadow. She has no magic, and she has to, like, figure out what to do now. But in this world, shadows also are super important for witches, because if they don't have their shadow, if they give it up, they become ill with a wasting disease that kills them in, like, a varying amount of time. So she's kind of, like, dealing with the threat of that as well. So that's kind of as far as I've gotten. I'm very early in. I've read like 8% or something. So we've just gotten through, like, the setup that is on the back of the book. That's as far as I've gotten, but I am really liking Kosara as a character so far. She's very, like, practical. She's kind of funny in that, like, one of the, like, random details in chapter 1 is that her sister's ghost haunts the attic, and she, like, talks to it. And the sister's ghost is, like, a Kikimora, which is, like, a vengeful ghost. She was murdered, and so this is, like, the ghost that has come out of the, like, hatred and anger and pain that she was feeling at the end. And so she is this, like, vengeful ghost living in her attic, and she's just, like, talks to it like it's still her sister, which I thought was a fun detail. And yeah, that's as far as I've gotten. I like Kosara. So she's, like, getting settled in Belgrad, and I think there's gonna be some sort of murder mystery. I think the back of the book says she gets involved with, like, a detective, and that murder mystery maybe links back to her escape from Chernograd. There's, like, the wall has maybe been breached or something, if I remember correctly from the premise. So I am excited to see what's going to happen there. I'm curious to see what that mystery is going to be like. I'm excited to see what kind of adventures she's going to go on and what kind of threat she's going to face, since there are no monsters in Belgrad, or at least not the monstrous kind. There are probably plenty of human monsters, but none of the, like, kind of folklore monsters, which the book is based in, like, kind of Slavic folklore, and it's supposed to be kind of witchery. So I'm very excited about this. It's very cool so far, and I'm excited to see where things are going to go next. The tentacle wall at the very beginning, very upsetting. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I'm still very early in, and I am enjoying it. I think that Kosara is a cool character, and I don't know what to expect beyond that. Well, I didn't check in at the 50% mark of Foul Days because I had a cozy little kitty all curled up in my lap. Elwood was very excited. We were having some snuggle time. He came over to sit. He loves when I sit in the love seat of my office because he gets to, like, get on my lap, because it's a reclining love seat, and he's just, like, it's his favorite thing in the world. So I had a warm little kitty in my lap. I couldn't possibly move. I can't disturb him when he is cozy like that. I've also just noticed it's a little dark over here. Let me see if that helps. That's a little better. Close enough. So I did not check in at 50%, but I have now finished Foul Days. I read most of it today. I just decided to go ahead and, like, power through it, read the rest. And I think I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. This was pretty good. I think it is pretty obvious that it's a debut. Hi, Pumpkin. Hang on, buddy. Hey, bud. What you doing? He just reached up and put his little paws on my hip, so we have to pay attention to him. You happy, little guy, Pumpkin? Yeah. Oh, big yawn. Okay, after Pumpkin time, we had a brief technical difficulty. I apparently set this to a different setting at some point. I don't remember why, but it was doing something weird. I have fixed it now. And now we have paid attention to Pumpkin. He's happy. He's over here, hanging out. But back to what I was saying, I think this book really clearly reads like a debut. It definitely has some weirdness in the pacing, and I think some of the character relationships are underdeveloped. But like overall, I generally enjoyed this. I think it's fun. I think the ending is good. Yeah, generally it was a pretty fun time. So throughout this, we're following Kasara, and she has traded her shadow to leave Chernograd, which is the city of monsters. And she immediately regrets this decision, and she starts to have a really advanced version of the like wasting sickness, shadow wasting sickness that affects witches who have traded their shadows. It happens like very quickly for her, and it's advancing very quickly. And she's trying to get her shadow back. And in the process of doing that, in her investigations, she ends up encountering Asen Bakarov, who is a detective. He's like the only detective in the supernatural investigations unit in Belgrade, because there's no monsters in Belgrade, and there's only a handful of witches. So he's, you know, he's a detective, but he doesn't have a whole lot going on, and he seems to be primarily working on like smuggling and like the smuggling of magical artifacts. So that's kind of his whole deal. So they were working together to try and track down the person who has taken Kasara's shadow, because that person is also tied to his like smuggling investigations. So that's kind of where things kick off. And I don't want to say too much about the actual plot, because it goes a couple of different directions. It's got a bit of a mystery. There is a murder that they're trying to solve that's kind of wrapped up in everything. There's like betrayals. There's a romance definitely in the center of it. If you heard the beginning of that premise and went, there's a romance here, you are correct. There is a romance. I would say a fairly mild one, and I generally liked it, but there is a romance in it, and it's a little bit fairy tale-esque. There's lots of different monsters. There's lots of random figures. There was some weirdness, I think, and I think the figures gives me a good point to jump off on to some of the issues I had, which is that the vibe of it was very strange. The comps given for it are that it's for fans of The Witcher and Naomi Novik, and I don't think it connects to either of those things beyond the fact that it has monsters and monster hunters in it, because both of those have a very distinctly kind of medievally, maybe up to the 18th century kind of a vibe. This is firmly like 1940s, 1950s, somewhere in there, and I was taken aback by the amount of technology in it. So the setting and the time period is very different. Like there's phones and voice recorders and forensic science and all of these kinds of things, but I would say it's like firmly like 1940s, 1950s kind of feeling to it, and to the kind of general technology that's available to the characters. So that kind of threw me off. I don't think the book does a great job of setting up its general like tone or setting in the beginning, and it takes a while for any of the monster stuff to really matter. So there's a lot of stuff in like, I would say like the first third of the book, where people are just throwing around like Rusalkas and I've immediately forgotten the words, Uphears and Verkalax. They're just like saying these words and referring to the fact, sorry I'm shaking the camera, referring to the fact that they exist and that they're a big deal in Chernograd, but they're not really relevant. So it's just this kind of confusing information that's being thrown at you without having any kind of like context for it. So I think that was a little much. It's just like this information just being thrown at you, and it's like, I don't understand why any of this matters. I also think that like some of the big red herrings and some of the twists are really, really obvious. I guessed several of the major twists, and you also have this like very small cast of characters, so trying to figure out like who's in on it, who's the betrayer, fairly easy, because you don't have a whole lot of people to choose from. There's like 4 or 5 central characters, I would say, besides the main villain, Zeme. So I think that the mystery was a little underdeveloped, but I did think that the way that they dealt with each situation was fun, and I liked that they hit a lot of like real obstacles. This was kind of the opposite of The God and the Gumiho, where I felt like things went too easily for them in that book. In this one, it felt like the stakes were real, like things were actually happening that were dangerous and difficult, that really stood in their way of being able to solve the murder they were investigating, of trying to find Kasara's shadow. So I did really appreciate that. It felt like the stakes mattered and were really real for the characters. And for the most part, I liked the relationship that developed between Kasara and Asen. I think that it maybe could have been a little bit better developed, because I think some pieces of it felt pretty forced. And in particular, some of the conflicts in the latter half of the book that they get into, these kind of like personal conflicts, just felt forced. They didn't feel natural or believable. And there was this issue that I was having with them where it felt a little like the things that they were talking about to deal with those conflicts weren't really the root of the problem, but neither of them ever addressed that, and it felt like the book was trying to say that Kasara was justified in some of her anger and frustration with some things that Asen was doing, but it never really acknowledged like how horrible the things that she had done to him were. So I feel like there's some, I don't know, something there at the conflict bits in the latter half that just doesn't feel believable, and it feels a little bit like it never really gets resolved, or they just kind of like brush it under the rug and are like, we're gonna apologize for the kind of surface level pieces of this, but we're not going to address like the central root of the problem. And I found that a little bit frustrating. I think that the ending is really fun. I really liked the solution to the end. I think there's some stuff that gets skipped over I would have liked to see. There's a bit where Kasara has to do some research, and we basically don't see any of that. We're like, oh, she's gonna do research, and she's done the research. Okay, moving on to the next thing, which I think was part of why the pacing felt so weird. There's like a timeline. We're told that the foul days last 12 days, and like the first 4 days are the first 20% of the book, and the next like 4 days are the next like 60% of the book. So it just feels weirdly paced. Yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit rambly now, but general issues. Pacing was a little weird. Some of the relationships were a little underdeveloped. I think some pieces of the mystery were extremely obvious. There was one thing that I was so mad at Kasara for not figuring out sooner, which I think would have, if she had figured it out sooner, if it had been dealt with sooner, would have made a lot more sense for her relationship with Asen. There were just like some things like that that just felt, I think, overall a little bit underbaked. They just needed a little more time, and they could have been really, really good. That said, I think that the bones of this book are fantastic. There's a lot of fun monster hunting bits, there's some cool magic stuff, there's some interesting conversations about like domestic abuse and grooming, and also cycles of abuse and the way that people are prone to like committing the violence that was done to them to other people. There's, I think, some interesting conversations there. I think it's a little on the nose in this with the Zeme, but overall, I think it's an interesting idea. And I did enjoy this one enough that I do want to read the sequel, which is coming out later this year. Based on how underbaked this one felt, I'm a little worried about that short timeline, because this one is coming out later this month on the 25th, and then we're getting the sequel in October. And I'm a little worried about that timeline, just given that this felt a little underbaked. I'm hoping that some of that's going to be resolved in book 2. We do get a bit of a cliffhanger, so I definitely want to see how all of that's going to wrap up. It's not like a massive cliffhanger, but it's this little like, oh, have they won actually? Kind of a thing. And I'm interested to see what Genevieve de Mova is going to do with that element of it for the second book. They've also got like a couple of other loose threads that have been raised throughout this book that are clearly going to be resolved in book 2 that I would like to know the answers to. So overall, very fun. I had an enjoyable time reading it. I think it's an enjoyable book to read. It just is one of those where you start to look a little past the surface level and you're like, okay, this is a little underdeveloped. This has got a few issues. The writing was pretty good. I enjoyed the writing for the most part. There was kind of a lot of metaphors, but I felt like they were really like interesting metaphors that gave you some sort of interesting description. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm fine with this because it's kind of fun and interesting, and I like the way that they're setting like a specific atmosphere for the book. So overall, writing was pretty good. Very fun story. A little bit shaky in some points. Definitely feels like a debut, but there's enough there that I enjoyed that I will be interested to see what Genevieve de Mova is going to do going forward, like what her future work is going to look like, because I think there's a lot of really solid elements here that have, you know, a lot of potential for her to like build on them and become an even better writer. So yeah, glad that I picked this one up. I am Also glad that I finished it. I felt like I was kind of dragging on it. It was some of the early parts of the book were having trouble holding my attention, but I'd say like the latter 2/3 really solid and kind of kept things moving. The first third, very abrupt, constant like abrupt changes in the status quo. So I was having some trouble holding my attention. That's why I powered through it today, and I definitely had more fun with like the last 60 or 70% than I did with the first 20 to 30 to 40. That's the correct math, that one. But yeah, glad I picked it up, and I have successfully completed another arc. That's 2 off of my list. And I think I am going to end this vlog here so that I actually have time to edit it. It took me a lot longer to get through these 2 books than I anticipated. I want to make sure that I finally get this video up for you guys to watch. So I am going to leave it here. Let me know down in the comments below if you are planning to pick up either The God and the Gumiho or Foul Days. I would love to know. I think they're both good. I think they're solid and would be very fun reads for I think general audiences. I think these are both pretty like generally recommendable. So let me know in the comments below if you're planning to pick either of them up or other books that you're excited about that are coming out soon. I would love to hear about some other new releases as well. If you know of some that I have not included in like other lists, I'll link those if you want to check that out as well. But I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.